So let me now introduce our speaker, Sue Schein, who many of you know. She's been a long-time, vibrant presence at Ohavi Zedek. She spent years as a teacher of creative writing, much of that time in Quebec. She's also been a dedicated volunteer archaeologist working in Israel. And as you'll hear today, in recent years, Sue has volunteered to help develop programs to combat human trafficking of young Vietnamese women and girls, a very important, challenging, and heartbreaking problem. I'd ask, especially given the number of people here, that you hold off on questions until after Sue finishes her presentation. There'll be time for Q&A after that, and as I mentioned before, Sue will also be available after we close out the Q&A period. So with that, let's all welcome Sue here.
Oh, it's really great to see so many beloved faces here and some new faces. And I want to thank you just at the top for your interest in my project and adventures. I'm going to be wandering around amidst all of this technology, and I hope it all works as it's intended. I had a lot of support from the OZ staff setting up the microphones and on YouTube and the this and the that. And so at the top, I want to thank the luncheon crew for sure. I want the OZ staff. Wayne has been magnificent. And yay. And in the course of this, there's also somebody who donated to support or to sponsor this. She does not want to be recognized. I want to respect that, but I'm sending her a huge thank you. So I want to talk to you, as I said, I'm going to be tripping over this probably for the next half hour. So on the screen, isn't that the cutest dog you've ever seen? Yeah, that's Cadbury. And one day, as happens, Cadbury died. And that's how this whole adventure started for me. I'd retired fairly recently, or before that. And I decided my next chapter was going to be some personal travel. I'd always been interested in Vietnam, in particular the DMZ, the zone between the North and the South. So soon after Cadbury exited my life, I found myself in Vietnam. I'm a solo traveler. I travel slowly, and I just fell in love with the country. I was having such a great time. As many of you who've been there know, the Vietnamese people are hugely welcoming. On that first trip, I'd heard about and ended up going to the extreme north. It's called the tribal areas or ethnic areas. Most of the ethnicities and the tribes there have resisted Vietnamization. They really don't, many of them don't even speak Vietnamese, but they don't have a very strong national affiliation. In their very separate and distinct cultures, I started to learn about, two things. One, there was a small company that was devoted to what they were calling ethical travel. They circulate as much money as they can back into the community, and their whole staff are Hmong women who function as guides and who share their culture. So you trek with them, and they bring you into their homes, and you sleep there, and they cook with you, and they share their culture very generously, and they were magnificent. I loved them. And I also started to hear about a practice, I don't know quite what else to call it. It's not unique to the Hmong people. It's quite prevalent in the world, of kidnapping young women and forcing them into coercive marriages. Many places in the Baltic areas and in the Romani cultures and African, I was reading a document, there was about 50 different countries where kidnapping of girls and forcing them into marriages these are not arranged marriages. These are non-consensual marriages, are still an active process. And so that is true in the north of Vietnam. So I have a lot of photos to show you. And first I want to do a sound check in the back. My voice is, can everybody hear me? Yes? Okay. If you have trouble going forward, let's reverse that. If you have trouble hearing me, raise your hand. Okay, this is better? Okay. And feel free to cue me or change up what I'm doing. I'm fine with that. So I have a lot of photos, and for various technological reasons, I put them into a Word document that I'm going to be flipping through. And it's going to look ugly, and this is what it's going to look like. Very soon after I started going into the north, I've made many trips there by now. This all started about 10 years ago. My first trip was about 10 years ago. The woman on the left is named Hoa. She's not Hmong, but she's lived in the areas of the Hmong people, and she employs and trains and adopts many, many, many Hmong girls and women. On her right is my dear friend Zhe, and we're going to revisit these people in a minute. I just want you to see their faces. This is the guiding light. His name is Kai. He's Hua's son. One of the major characters in this story I put together to tell you, one of the major players in this project is a young woman. She's now, I think, 19. Her name is Cha. She's one of the Black Hmong girls who is the driving force of this project. Our original intention was to design a training and train girls and young women to run these trainings autonomously and stand alone. And we're almost at that point now. Without Cha, it would be a much, much, much harder row. And on the right is her sister, Mi, which can get confusing if you're talking about her. She's a mountain guide, so when someone says, follow me, it gets all scrambled up. And lots of times, even now, when I'm talking to people on the phone, I said, well, and then, get it to me, and then da-da-da-da. But she's beautiful and talented. On the left is Phil, and that's Kai, his son. They're a multiracial family, and Phil's been in the area, well, on and off, but mostly on, since he was 17 years old, and fell in love with Hoa. So, let there be more pictures soon. Oh, yes. Who's that? But what I want you to see is my name badge. When Cha was about this age, this is Cha when she was, let's say, 10 years ago, and Mi was about, that's Cha as well, sorry. Mi was, you'll see in this picture, maybe 13. One day they came home and their mother was gone and nobody knew where their mother was. As many as 1 in 4 families in the north, in the Sapa and Laukai area, have girls and women who have disappeared from their families. Everybody knows somebody who's gone, but these are disappearances that affect not only the kidnapped and captured girls, and I'm going to talk more about that in a minute, but the children they leave behind. Usually they're not mothers, but obviously Mi and Cha's mom was taken. But also they leave behind the grandmothers and the older people for whom in the Hmong tradition, the stolen girls were their life support. And so these families are greatly fractured and impacted by this practice, which I'm going to be calling, has many names. Quaintly in the Hmong culture, it's called bride pulling or bride snatching. Soon after their mom disappeared, and their sister, and this is a disappearance poster for their sister, Sue. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce her name, but it's spelled S-O. You know, this would actually be a good time for me to insert the following comment. I'm probably going to say things that are not entirely accurate, but to the best of my knowledge is all I can do and all I can offer you. And so I'll ask forgiveness, not only for my technical, crude practices here, but also in case by any stretch of the imagination, any of my Hmong friends get to see this through CCTV maybe, I might be making some errors, but they're good-hearted ones. Okay, so here are the two girls. Their moms disappeared, their sisters disappeared, their fathers, just an outrageous and very irresponsible alcoholic man, very violent. And Phil and Hua, you remember them from the beginning, took the girls in and sent Cha to a boarding school where she she became literate and numeric. Me never did, so me still doesn't read. They're multilingual. These girls are, I don't even know how many languages they speak. And they started to live with Hua and Phil, Cha for a longer period of time. This is just a placeholder picture because I wanted to mention just a few of the features of Hmong culture that make these girls very vulnerable, and I think this also carries through to other communities, where desperate poverty and subsistence farming, if it's called farming at all, are a feature. The Hmong live in isolated communities far in the mountains, and they still do, and that means that the young people, although they might have cell phones now, they really don't have very much access to saving or savior organizations, police, after-school programs, none of that. They live in and entirely stay for what they expect to be the rest of their life in their very isolated mountain communities. They're also trained towards obedience. Girls and women are not raised with the idea that they can challenge authority. So even when there can be a monster giving the rules, these girls are really trained to be obedient and not to stand out from a crowd. They're also raised in kind of communalism, which means that it's very, very, very hard for them to assert leadership. When we get our trainings together, and I'm just about to get to that, the hardest part of that is actually finding girls who have the kind of charisma and confidence to stand out from the group and to become leaders, because they're a culture not to do that. In about 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, Phil and Hua started a project, the first iteration of this project, and they ran it for about a year. They did get some funding from the Communist Cadre organization, the Women's Union, which was pulled almost immediately. But they were able to run a workshop that has some similarity to what we're doing now. They ran it for a year. They delivered, I don't know exactly how many workshops. But in the course of that, it's really, really, really hard to get numbers and to know how many girls are trafficked. I know that every 5 days in this outlying area, a girl disappeared. But we don't really know because nobody is keeping track. There are no organizations that are really doing this other than Ethos, the spirit of the community. That's who I'm working with. So we expect that the first round of workshops reduced the kidnapping of girls by 70%. The only way we can really get that information is by befriending border guards on the Chinese border, because there's nobody keeping the statistics. But there was a very marked reduction in kidnapping. And then the project ended because the people who were running the Women's Union wanted the budget. So I got involved some years after that program had ended. It ended mostly because they didn't have any funding, and they have a young family, and they're running a small business. they didn't really have a financial way of making these workshops happen. But I got really excited by it, and over a number of years, started to get more and more involved, and really sparking this project back into life. Everybody wanted it to be reiterated, but it was a happy collision of my interest and their abilities. And in the course of the 3 trips over the last year, we were able to update the old material. It needed a lot of updating because conditions on the ground had changed, like social media, grooming. The Chinese border hardened during the pandemic, so no longer were girls being dragged on mountain trails on the back of donkeys, but gangs were now involved, and there are a whole bunch of other new conditions, which meant that excuse me, some of our material in the old workshops worked, and we spent quite a lot of time revising it. When I say we, I want to show you, the first thing we did was worked on revamping, updating the workshops, and training the girls to lead these workshops. The end objective has always been, and still is, to have these as standalone projects. 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old girls are leading, as you'll see. I hope we have time for some of this stuff I've brought you. They lead it, they run a day-long workshop. They're a little bit, as you would expect, 16, 17, 18-year-old girls, a little less enthusiastic about all the logistical support. The lunches, getting the whiteboard there, renting the car, that kind of stuff. So a grown-up really, all right, a grown-up, somebody needs to be helping them organize themselves to actually get everyone in the right place at the right time. As soon as that happens, let me tell you, magic happens. As you'll see in some of these upcoming photos, the workshop itself, and I've written the outlines on some of the tables, so I probably won't go into a lot of detail about the workshop step by step, but they're about 7 hours. At the end of that 7 hours, these young girls are sitting on the edge of their seat. They're rapt, sometimes they're in tears, often. They're so involved in learning and caring and reacting to what they're hearing that it's a really extraordinarily heart-moving experience for me to witness. So this slide is, this picture is some of the girls who have been, who are training to be the workshop leaders. It's a peer-to-peer model, and we always need to bring in 2 or 3 other new youngsters to train to be trainers. Cha, for instance, who's a driving force, wants to go to university full-time, and so people, so some of these youngsters are moving in and out of leadership. Cha's in the middle, woman named Kara on the right, and on the left is the irrepressible Zhe. Zhe is just one of my favorite people in the whole world. They're Black Hmong, that's their ethnicity. That's Zhe in the middle, me is on the left. So, like our trainings, when we train the trainers, we also start off with light material. There's play involved, as you'll see from the document I gave you, which is called The Bones. We start off actually with play. And in our training the trainers, we also graduate into the more compelling and heartbreaking material later in the day. So these are pictures mostly from last year. Duh. Me and Zhe. At this point in the training, the trainers, Cha and to her right, her sister Mi, are starting to deal with some of the more difficult material, where what they will be dispensing, what they will be leading, is a workshop day that gets from kind of lighthearted stuff into extremely challenging, heartbreaking material. So that's where we are right now when we were training the trainers, when I was taking this picture. And remember, these are the girls who have lost their mom, an aunt, and their sister. Their mom has never come back Cha, I just heard from Cha a few weeks ago, or last week. She's had her first contact with her mother. Her mother, most of the Hmong women of that generation are not literate, can't read texts, can't use telephones because they don't know the numbers. Finally, someone made contact with Cha's mom, Cha and me's mom, but they've essentially been, their family's been ripped apart. So, I'm going to show you some pictures now of that were taken when we were running these workshops. I've been to 5 of them altogether this year, from November till November, or November till the following December. We have run 5, and we have 1 more in the calendar year. It's not exactly calendar year, but you know what I mean. And so some of these I've grabbed from a couple of the workshops I've attended. The first thing to note is that they take place out of the city centers. When I'm there, everyone works hard to make sure I can actually walk to the frickin' schoolhouse or yard. The ones I'm going to show you today is mostly outdoors. It's outdoors, or the city hall kind of structures. And there are always a lot of people from the village who are not part of our training, who are just drawn there and actually learning as much as they can spill over. So I take photos of them. She was coming and she spent, this woman, I don't know how old she was, I'm guessing in her 80s or 90s, spent 7 hours standing there watching. And I wanted to be able to say to her, where are your daughters? Where is your sister? But I didn't have the language, obviously. Nice jackets, a little like mine. So the classes start by some ground rules. This is just a sample from one of the classes. There's usually 40 to 50 girls there. They range in age from 11 or 12 to 16 or 17. We start off intentionally with, as I said, something not only lighthearted, but that is going to get them to, it's going to kind of jolt them out of their traditional learning pattern, which is Vietnamese schools, you learn by rote and you repeat. You memorize and repeat, you memorize and repeat, you memorize and repeat, you recite it back. There's no original thinking that's ever encouraged, and that really just doesn't happen in the day. So for us to present a workshop, the first barrier is to get them to start to think of themselves as authoring their own thoughts. To do that, this is a balloon game. It's a kind of scrambled madcap game, but they have to start to problem solve, which is not part of their learning educational regime. And we start with a ball game where they have to form teams and work together. But the trick is they cannot use language. When these girls, and some of the girls that we've been teaching are no doubt disappearing, now, but when that happens to them, they kind of wake up, or they suddenly find themselves in a country where they can't use their spoken language. Most of the young girls now can read, but they can't read Chinese characters. They're taken deep into China, and they can't communicate with anyone until such time if they can find another Hmong speaker. So our games, which are sort of in ascending order of importance, encourage them to think for themselves, form teams, and to communicate without language. So it looks all very lighthearted and silly, but in actual fact, it's pretty well engineered to get them to feel some kind of confidence in themselves and to break out of the orders and the authority figures that are giving them, who are in control of their lives once they're kidnapped. In this slide, they have to rank themselves in order of their hair length. But once again, they can't speak. They're sort of giggly at this point, but they're also kind of a little uncomfortable in a good way. There's another exercise I don't think I could go on. I mean, there's thousands of pictures, so I'm just going to summarize quickly. one of our newer updated exercises called red light, green light. I'm sure the American schools do some version of this, but we put a lot of content in questions, and they have to run to green light means go or yes or okay, and red light means yikes, ouch, danger. And we worked a lot of social media scenarios into this. You're at the lake and you're there with your girlfriend, and she has a brother who has a cousin who has a friend who, and he says, "Can I get you a drink?" And then he says, "Oh, go look at my friend's bike," and then you come back into the restaurant, but you're not sure that your drink, they don't know anything about drink spiking, drugs, anything like that. So we are telling them with this exercise that they need to start thinking about being drugged. There are a lot of kidnap scenarios. I'm not going to rehearse all of them, but I will say it used to be some old guy would come around and grab some girl and she'd disappear, but more and more, it's much more sophisticated now. It's happening a lot. And it very often is a young girl or a young boy in her extended family or her friend's family. Those kids are paid $4, $6, $10 to get the girl into another scenario where she is then handed over to very significant and very dangerous kidnappers. But that initial first intake is more and more. It could be a woman at the market. It could be a very fashionable woman who looks like she was from Saigon. It could be her cousin. They're the first step of a process that ends up very quickly, usually with a girl waking up or coming to or realizing that she has been taken across the border into China, and often very deep into China. Sometimes she's drugged, and sometimes she's not. As you'll see in a little bit, we do some role playing, and one of our problems is that currently a way of hooking some of these girls, these children, is to say, "Oh, my uncle has an electronics store just over the border," because the border's only like 12 miles away or something. And you're so pretty. You'd be great working in an electronics store. You want a job? Just get on the bike, and then you'll end up. He got an apartment for you, and you can have a motorbike, and you get an iPhone. And so after we've done with the sort of more playful parts of our workshop, we segue into demystifying China. First, we show a lot of these placards that have pictures of the mystique of China, how glamorous and romantic it is. And then we insert cards that show urban congestion, drunkards, the much more terrible living conditions, really bad air. Vietnamese are pretty sensitive to the air quality, so that's pretty persuasive. Here's me beginning that demystification process. She's starting to show what things are really like in China. And from there we get to a conversation that has to do with the Chinese boyfriends that are being promised. They're models, they're athletes, they're electronics store owners, they're entrepreneurs. In the intake, in the initial hooking phase, that's what's described to these young girls. If you just come and get on my bike, I'm going to go introduce you to this, gorgeous guy in China. In actual fact, in China, because of the one-child policy, and also because of the extreme kind of gender bias, there are many, many millions of men more than there are women in China. And it is cheaper for those men to buy a Vietnamese girl than it is to pay the bride price and to try to persuade a Chinese woman to marry him. Okay, Wayne's serving as my timekeeper here. So those men who buy the Chinese girls are generally men who can't find a Chinese woman to marry him. After lunch, we we started with a little game. They're more complex now. The girls really need to figure out how to escape that kind of a lockup without language. And then Cha, who always likes to play the bad guy, starts to enact some very hard-hitting escape scenarios. This is how to get off a motorcycle. The guy's showing you his motorbike and he's giving you a ride. In this instance, and there are some that I find too troubling to show you. She's capturing or relating what happens after you've been taken. The young girl on the right ended up in tears in this play acting, and we had to stop it. These girls are very, I mean, it's kind of giggly, but it's also kind of terrible for them. And then we start showing them a videotape, which is of the a first-person testimony of what happens to a girl who's been taken and who escapes. I want to run through, this is the face. These girls have been sitting there for 7 hours, and I brought a bunch of these little old iPads there, and that's what they're watching. And look at how rapt they are. They've been, and they're very deeply moved by this. Of course, all of them have family members, almost all, maybe half of them have family members who've gone. I'm not going to comment on some of, these are just clips from one of the, from 8 to A, a TV show that I found. And I'm not going to read them. I'm just going to let you read them for yourself. And I'm going to go, I hope not too quickly. This is a woman who actually escaped. Some do escape, but not very many. Am I going too fast? What? A family friend who was out to, she was sold by a family friend who was out to make a quick buck. This is the girl who escaped and who's testifying. I knew nothing until I arrived in some district and saw Chinese characters. It was then that I realized I was trafficked. Once the girls cross over into China, they are sometimes tortured and beaten into submission. When I was sold, a trafficking ring in China bought me for a family. They kept moving me around, and I never really knew where I was. And they moved me to a particular house, and I was sold to the family there. There's sort of 3 parts to her experience. One is a coercive marriage, and then there's they're enslaved for domestic and agricultural work, and they're bred. Once, of course, these Vietnamese children have children in China, as happened to me and Cha's mom, they're much less inclined to try to escape. I'm sorry, they told me that if I gave birth to at least 2 children, they would return me to Vietnam. Just last year, Chinese police rescued more than 1,100 women from the Southeast Asian region alone. It's just so grossly an undercount as to be laughable. Many of them were sold as wives in China. More than 3,000 people in Vietnam, women and girls, were trafficked. There's something I want to show you that I think is a more synthesized and a little quicker way of getting the same information. It's about 5 minutes, and I'm just going to try to play it for you. Excuse me. Yeah, it's here.
mountain. And we live in a small village. We make our own clothes, we grow our own hemp. The most dangerous girl's age is around 15 to 18 years old.
From everything I've been able to ascertain, the trafficking issue that exists in Vietnam stems from the one-child policy in China, which I believe was established in 1979. Data from 2016 suggested there were 76 reported cases of girls being trafficked from Sabah in a year, which would indicate roughly one girl every 5 days. Now, they are reported cases.
I lost my mom about 2 years ago, and my sister about 6 months after that.
I have a friend, and she been stolen to China around 12 years ago, and we don't know that she's still alive or she is dead.
The minute you're over the border, it's almost too late. It really is a needle in a haystack situation. I was once hearing a story of a girl who came back, who she said that girls are categorized based as a premium product. If you're premium, it means you're beautiful, it means that your value is immeasurably more. It's difficult to ascertain the exact cost, but we're talking thousands of dollars. We were looking at the situation and thinking, where best could we interject? We haven't got the facilities here to be working with the police. We certainly can't be going into China supporting with rescue operations. But in terms of this area, we've noticed the vulnerability. And if we can interject at that point and support girls with knowing how best to protect themselves, we hope it would minimize the number of people going to China in the first place. Although we're only able to impact on a smaller group of girls at any one time, we hope that information can be spread far and wide.
In the interest of adjusting for time, I wanted to just give you I'm going to show you a few more slides, and then I will play a short videotape that was taken on the last day that I was working there, a workshop called Under the Spirit Tree. It doesn't have words, so I'll probably talk over it. I want to jump ahead here. Oh, at the end of the first person testimony, the girls pledge or promise to share what they've learned. This is the phone number for, and they're given also other means to help them once they are in China, if they can get to a cell phone, if they can get to a phone plan. They've memorized our number. They have to memorize this before they can leave. They're also they promise that they will bring their learning to at least 5 other girls in their community. I wanted to show you this. I don't know if you can read it. And notice what I want you to notice is right here. I'm going to magnify that. This was the very end of the last workshop. That was about a week before I left Vietnam this past December. So I think it's about December 1st. This says, "Thank you, Ducky," on it. As we look ahead, I was blah, blah, blahing to Ducky one day quite a while ago, and Emily and other members of her family were involved in this as well. And before I knew it, and largely because of who this family is here, we had secured the funding for about a year of this project. The budget was a little different at that time, but this workshop was happening because of that help. Once the Communist Party was kicked off the boat, I pledged myself to try to finance another, well, at least 1 year, hopefully 2 years. If we do a 3-year cycle, then we can go back to the same villages because they'll be all new girls. In other words, they age out, and then their younger sisters and friends can come to our trainings. I want to play, if I can find it. It should be here. Not that one. This one. I'm going to turn the sound down, and I'll just talk a little bit over it, and then we'll be ready for some questions. And whoops, I didn't get the sound. Should be down over here, right? Settings. I'm going to just try. Whoops, that doesn't work. Bear with me 1 second. View, exit screen, settings. Pardon? Okay, where was it now? Settings. I knew I would have trouble doing this on the hoof. Sound, I'm just going to turn the volume down. That should do it. This is called Under the Spirit Tree because the location, as you'll see, is under a tree. Are you still able to hear me? Yeah. So, and this is one of Ducky and Emily's classes. As you'll see, I've described what you'll be seeing. Our next phase is, I went there to help co-design a module for boys and men to try to encourage them to step outside of either being passive or being aggressive in terms of this practice. We didn't get to do that for reasons of health, etc. And I've committed myself to try to do some fundraising. I've left on the tables where you can link to me and I can get funds to them. This was a really beautiful day in my life. I can't watch this without crying. Well, I guess that's all you're going to get to see of it. Let me see if I can. I want to try something even weirder technologically. Which is to use the microphone in this way.
We want to say a big thank you to everyone else's community. We will be working hard to make sure the women in our community will be safe. Hello, friends of Sue in Vermont. Thank you for your interest in our projects. We are working very hard to end this problem of trafficking, and it makes us happy to know you are interested. And a very big special thank you to Ducky.
My favorite of all of them. It was a little hard to get in touch with me because she doesn't read or write, but we worked this out, and Ducky will forever be known as Duckling.
Hello, Sue's friend. Thank you very much for interesting of this project. We work very hard to end the traffic of girls. And thank you very much, Duckling,
Nearly. Yeah.
to support this project. Thank you very much.
I could just leave that playing and then see if you have any questions, and I'll come around with a microphone. Just raise your hand, or then I'll have to answer.
I just wanted to tell people we're going to have about 10 or 15 minutes for Q&A. So for those people who can stay, that would be great. I know, the end time is normally 1:15. Obviously, we started late. So if you have another appointment, of course, feel free to leave.
How did the language work for you? And also, how did you get involved in this? And what was your life like when you were there? And one other thing, the basket wasn't sent around to every table, so.
Because Hmong girls generally don't learn by reading, and Hmong didn't have an alphabet until very recently, they learn language acoustically, which means that most of the girls that are working in this project have 3, 4, 5, 6 languages. I speak English to them, and then they translate whatever needs happening. There's always somebody who will be by my side helping me. I can speak French, and only the old people understand French, but they hate the French so much they won't speak French to me. What was my experience? I had work during my professional life that at times I really loved. Most of the times there were big bureaucracies and institutions, and life was pretty gnarly. It wasn't until I started to do this work that I felt that I was born to do it, and that I achieved through, as a volunteer, as an autonomous person, and making an active choice, I could do the work I really wanted to be doing. And I end up in tears a lot. It's so heartful work to be doing. And I want to thank the people who've made it possible. And if any of you have any desire to let this work continue, I just accept it with great gratitude. There was a third question, but I don't remember it. Pass the bucket. Any other questions? I'm sure. Duckling. Wait. You do, because you're recording.
Okay. I'm interested to know, is the school set up like a regular school with classrooms with the youngest and the middle, or is it set up according to the skills that the children have? And how long do they stay in a class and go from room to room? And is there a curriculum for the children to meet?
You probably know that Duckling was many years a classroom teacher. The schools are very primitive. There are maybe 6, 8, 10 classrooms usually in a line. I mean, I haven't seen that many of them, but maybe 10 schools that I will have seen. The students stay sitting in the class, very crowded, the whole time. They only get up for lunch for maybe, half hour. They don't run around, they don't play. They listen and they memorize. Before this year, I was really involved in some children rescue. Strange thing happened. I ended up involved with some children who needed rescuing. And when we finally returned them to their village, we needed to get them out of a domestically very violent situation. It was the teachers from the school who came down into the house and helped sort of social engineer those children's safety. So there's some very, very, very motivated young teachers there, but by and large, the school situations are as primitive as you could imagine them being.
Well, I'm Emily, Ducky's daughter. I think most of you know. I think my mom thought that part of this funding was going towards a school, not just for workshops that they were doing. So that's where the question came from. She was thinking that it was a school that you were running.
not just the workshops. But I have a question. How many girls did you say on average come to the workshops?
We only have the capacity for 40, but we've had as many as 50, as far as I know. Karen?
Thank you, Sue, for bringing this amazing work here. My question is about violence and how safe it is for, the girls and you being doing this project. What's the concern for violence and safety?
You know, if we were in Europe or maybe other places, that would be a factor. Somebody here, not seeing you right now, was talking about some work in Poland that felt dangerous. In Vietnam, things are not just that organized. There are gangs involved, but I'm nowhere near them. And we're no longer, this organization, Ethos, and myself are no longer involved in primary rescues. If we see girls at all, they've been returned or they're very young and they're still in their home communities. So I think there's a zero factor of danger as far as I can figure out. And also, bride pulling or bride kidnapping tradition goes back many generations. It's deeply built into the culture within the Hmong communities. So most of the time when we end up going to a town or a village, rather, it's because the old people in that village, the old women have asked us to come. So.
Is this the same Hmong community that we keep hearing about that China admits they've got like 2 million of them in concentration camps somewhere in the middle of China? And Uyghur. Okay, so there's no people in a group there. They're really underrepresented. Correct?
I think there are 9 million Hmong. It's still in China. They also straddle the borders of Laos and northern Vietnam.
I was surprised to see the slide about the Chinese recovering, even though you said the number was much smaller than what you know to be true, that the Chinese were working at all to recover these girls. Do you know much about that?
I don't believe it. I don't know anything about it except that I haven't heard about it happening, really. Sometimes Phil and Hua, especially Hua, phone very frequently, a few times a week anyway, their friends who are border guards just to keep an eye on the traffic, but that's not done through any official channels. I might be wrong in that, but as far as I know, zilch. The Vietnamese have publicized that they have a new campaign, another campaign to stop the practice, but I don't think that gets anywhere. I think that's just rhetoric. I mean, Ethos is a tiny, self-supported organization, and there's only one other organization I know that's in the south of Vietnam or the middle of Vietnam called Blue Dragon. They actually do rescue. They go over the borders and rescue. We don't do that work. 2 more questions, and Steve is one of them, and then Mary Beth.
I don't need a microphone.
No, because they're recording.
Oh, they're recording. Okay. I was going to say that, or ask that, about security as well. I wouldn't think the Chinese would appreciate your workshops or anything that would impede their supply of young girls. And I would, if we go by Chinese behavior elsewhere, you would be a prime target. So I wonder why you don't seem worried.
Well, honey, I'm there only like a few weeks a year. You know, the Chinese government doesn't seem to. It's the Chinese gangs that are the entrepreneurs here that are making the money. The government, as far as I know, seems to just perform a border guard and immigration. Now there's a hardened border. That was some of how we had to adapt the project. now there's fences engaged in proper crossings. And a few times, Hoa especially, who's a Vietnamese woman and who's not Western, had some pretty sketchy, she'd gone up to rescue her to meet people at the girls at the border who was just trying to escape and who was come down to the border. And so Hoa was there, I don't remember all the details of the story, for maybe a couple of days waiting, and she was distinctly uncomfortable, but she did not report feeling physically endangered as far as I remember. The other thing I have to say is that these Hmong girls and women are the bravest, most resilient, indomitable people I've ever met in my life. So even if there were what you and I would freak out in terms of personal danger, there's so much a part of their life that's so hard, and they have such a spirit that I don't know if I'd really hear about it in those terms. I'm a visitor, and I've got like round eyes, so and I'm so old they couldn't even get me in their vans or trying to get me on a motorcycle to kidnap me home. It ain't gonna happen.
Sue, where are the fathers and brothers in this? Do they protect at all?
Oh, about the only thing I can do with that question, Mary Beth, is cry. We were trying, I said we were trying to get a workshop together for boys and men, among young men. Deeply embedded in their culture is the practice of coercive marriage. And the family loses immense amount of face and reputation if a girl, for instance, comes back. She has a terrible life, even if her sexual activity, whether it's voluntary, involuntary, is a terrible stain on the family's honor. The men that I've heard or hear about reflect concerns about that, their status. Brothers are at this point until we can get back and really get this new aspect of the training going, don't really see it as a problem. It's been there forever. I mean, rescuing girls and women is one aspect, but for outsiders like me or Hoa even, who's Vietnamese, or Phil, to come in and say, your culture's been doing this for 10 generations and it has to stop because women are worth living and valuing. It's very complicated work. And I know that Mi's husband, who's named Hmong, he's also a friend of mine, there are one or two Hmong men who kind of have a clue, but alcohol, there's a lot of physical violence. The missing sister, their Cha and Mi's sister, Sue, who was taken. She actually, I think it's she who escaped, came back into Vietnam, somehow miraculously got married, because again, once you've been released, you have no value on. And then the man was so violent that recently there's been a lot of family drama trying to get her to safety. I think she might have actually been kidnapped back into China and then back. It's just the role of boys and men at this point is at the very best non-participatory. I think that's it, folks. I'm going to turn this over to Wayne.
Let's thank our super volunteer, Sue. And thank you all for being here this afternoon.